Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to this week's episode of the Non-Identity Podcast. Now, this week we're joined by someone who's, for our CEOs who's watching or listening, has some amazing hacks to share with you guys. It's Gresham. Hi, Gresham. Welcome to the show.
Lee, excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Before we get into the hacks and stuff, can you just let everyone know who you are and where you grew up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually grew up in the Washington D.C. area as much as I can remember. I've been here since I was about 5 years old. And a little bit about me is I always say like my story about a little bit more about who I was and who I am started when I was about 10 years old. So the reason I'm here in the D.C. area is because my dad was in the military. So we didn't move around a lot, but I've been in one place pretty much since I was five. But when I was about 10 years old, my dad got reassigned to actually go to an entirely different country for a year. He went to the UAE, and in the UAE, he obviously wasn't home with us, me and my mom. So it was a really difficult time. But one of the things that kind of was a good thing that came out of that was I started what became a family newspaper. So I used to interview and find out all these things that were going on in our family, and all those stories. And I would get into Microsoft Word. I put some clip art in, and I'd have a newspaper about all the things that were going on in our family. So I took that and we would send it to my dad so he would be updated on all the things that were going on in our family. But I also sold a lot of subscriptions to family members and friends of family and things like that. So that's really what I call my first media company. And that's what really got me started with a lot of things that I do. So fast forward a lot of years, a lot of ups and downs and things that happen. I now have like a digital marketing company. We focus on website maintenance, support, SEO services. And then we also have a slew of resources for business owners, have a daily podcast myself. We basically provide lots of resources, information, really things to help out CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners to succeed. So that's a little bit of my story, and I'm sticking with it.
Going back to your childhood, I know, like you said, like your dad was off serving, and obviously that was such an important role that he was playing in life. But being at the age of 10, obviously being male myself, not having that father figure about, how hard did you find that?
I found it hard in the sense that I remember like really boohoo and crying like on the way to the airport and back. And he was gone for a year, and he actually had left before. He left when I was younger too, and I think he left for 6 months at that time. I don't know the feelings that I was having. I'm an only child, so that was kind of like my buddy. That was like I would go outside out front and I would shoot basketball. My dad would come out and challenge me, beat me a lot of times. He would let me win a few times too. So it wasn't just like my dad was leaving at that time. It was like this is like my big brother, my partner. This is the person that's teaching me so many things. So it was really difficult. But I don't want to compare myself to those that may not have those father figures, because my dad was there as much as he could be, in the sense of at that time we didn't have Zoom and Skype and FaceTime and all those things. But I remember every morning we got to see an email from my dad. He would give us an update on what it was going on. So we had those things. So I definitely was blessed that in the sense that while he wasn't physically there, he was still there. And of course he came back as well too. So and then we knew that he was serving our country as well too. So it always kind of chokes me up a little bit anytime I don't know if you've seen those sports games where the dad is away or the mom's away, and then they surprise the kids, and it always hits home with me because that was like a tough time. But again, like some good things came out of it, and I still, even though they're not physically there, we know they're there with us and they still love and care about us.
No, exactly. And I bet also like the respect level, because what he was doing, it's not like, as you alluded to, your father decided to leave and pop in and out of your life. He was doing a service, and he's doing a service to your country. So I bet there must have been a pride thing as well.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it really set an example. I said my dad is always the person. He's not necessarily always going to tell you what to do, but just by, that's my dad, having that father figure, I'm going to pattern myself after him. And even though he was very and he is very big on like me being my own person and trying to make sure that I do what's for me, not always follow him. He can't help but not see that example and be, and look up to that and always want to aspire to be that person that sacrifices for the greatest good. So I think those are just one of the many lessons that he's taught me.
So as you said as well, you've like my fast forwarding now, you got into like media companies and websites and stuff like that. To me, media and social media is such a minefield. How did you learn behind all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is so I've been in business for about 10 years or so. So funny enough, it wasn't what it is now. Like even what I talked about with Skype and FaceTime and all these things, we didn't have all the technology we have now. We didn't have all the media that we have now either. And I think a lot of it was just kind of rolling up my sleeves and trying different things. Even though it's been around for I guess a fair amount of time, pretty much since I started my business, it still is very, very new. So I would even say, like, yes, you learn it, but you never ever really truly quote unquote master it because it's always constantly changing. It's always evolving. People are looking at different ways to use podcasts or to do SEO or to do social media. So there's lots of different angles and ways. And even these platforms are adding on different features and things as well. So I would say the way, of course, there's a way to kind of learn from people that are doing those tests and of course be able to hire people and do things like that. But I always feel like there's a lot of value in being able to kind of roll up your sleeves and test it out. And I'm definitely someone that, did a lot of that just because that's just my DNA. I'm somebody that likes to tinker with things. I'm very much so a busybody. So there's a good chance that if there's a new platform or something like that, even though I may not like actually provide the services, I probably have opened it up and at least played with it for a little bit. So I'm that person, and I'll probably always be that person, even if I'm old and gray, and I don't even know how to open up my phone or whatever the new thing is. I'll probably be that person trying to figure it out for my grandchildren or great grandchildren.
And what's your feelings about AI? Because obviously the way the world's going through AI, is it good? Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing?
I think it's really a good thing. And the reason I think that it's a good thing, I think with all things, there's always pros and cons. So it's not all 100% good. It's not all 100% bad. Here's my honest take about it is I think that sometimes it's going to bring out a lot of what our mindsets are around certain things. I think if we really look at it from an abundant mindset, we understand, and this is what I think threatens a lot of people and things. And I even hear this with a lot of the tech stuff that I do. I remember cold calling somebody to say, "Hey, I think that you should have a website for your business." And someone was saying, "Hey, you're selling that new age stuff and things like that." So I think you're always going to have that experience anytime there's new technology. But I think the true opportunity is when people understand that it's not either or, it's both, and both and better. How can I use my human skills? How can I use what it is an essence of me being human and being able to kind of leverage that with technology to either save time so I can spend more time with my family, save time so that I can just start another business, save time so I can do whatever it is that you decide to do with that time. And I think AI provides that opportunity, but I don't think um it should be necessarily wielded in a way that is not necessarily managed to some degree. And when I say managed, I don't mean controlled. I mean managed as far as I have this intention, I have this goal. How can I leverage this tool to be able to help me to get to that goal, maybe more accurately, consistently, faster, quicker, so that I can spend more time in my zone of genius and in my superpower? So I think that's the real big opportunity for AI. I know everybody's not gonna love it and gonna, open it with or bring it on with open arms and look at it from that. But I think it still provides a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, see, I'm 50-50 with it because I teach. We are having training sessions to learn when the students done homework through AI and stuff like that. So that side of things, it's then getting the students to try and work out another way of beating the system. So therefore, we've got to be on top of it like that. So that side, I don't like it. But then again, I use it for my podcast and stuff because it helps with my titles and my descriptions and stuff like that. So I see the cons, as you said, I see the pros and cons.
I appreciate you mentioning that because funny enough, that was one of the considerations I thought about because my son's 8, and just thinking about like how like when he gets older, especially like what, like I don't, you never want to put this technology in a place where people aren't thinking and it aren't thinking creatively. You want it to support sometimes, and I think of course, you don't want people to put essays in AI and not do any work because I think that there's a reason, not just for the essay and it's for like learning how to do some of those foundational things that maybe you won't be writing an essay about Huckleberry Finn, but you could potentially be writing in a way to communicate your message and to through an email. So I think it's not trying to lose sight of those foundational elements, and I think that's really tough for teachers, people that do have to hold the sanctity of what people are doing, and they are trying to teach them certain skills.
Exactly. And as you said earlier on, when we were just talking about AI, it's useful to help save time and that. You've come up with hacks for CEOs to save, obviously, help save time and focus their energy productively into the companies. What are these hacks, and how did you come about them?
Yeah, so when I started my podcast, so I wanted to really learn about entrepreneurship and business. And like I mentioned, I always go back to that 10-year-old Gresh and say, how would I learn about business? And my way was like, okay, well, let me just ask business owners. So I had a lot of I had an entrepreneurial spotlight column where I used to, interview people, find out why they started their business. But I would always ask them these foundational questions. So fast forward a couple years, I used to record these interviews. I would take these interviews, write up a blog post, and the recordings would just stay there. And I heard about this thing called podcasting. And I said, oh, that sounds pretty cool. So let me take these valuable recordings I have, add an intro and outro there. Sounds terrible in quality, honestly, the first ones. But let me see what comes from there. So then I started to do long form podcasts. And what ended up happening is I said, okay, I was overextended with my digital marketing business. I was on boards doing lots of different things. I started to figure out or really try to understand, how can I be more intentional? How can I be more effective and efficient myself with the things that I'm doing? What's my superpower? How do I lean into that? And I came back to that 10-year-old Gresh and I said, you know what? I would really just try to marry content with, a service and provide value for the people that I want to serve. So I really want to like get out of all these networks, all these things that I'm doing and lean more into this. So that's where I came up with the idea of doing the I Am CEO podcast, which was that daily podcast. And I started to figure out, hey, what are the most valuable questions? And one of the most valuable questions was, what CEO hacks are you using? What things do you lean on to make you more effective and efficient? What things are you doing on a daily basis? And that's really where everything started from. So I was able to hit 1,600 episodes. So I have lots and lots of hacks that people have mentioned. I think the most powerful thing is when you hear hacks over and over again, you're like, hey, this may be something you want to look at. So that's what kind of led, to what eventually became like a directory of different hacks and all of those things. But it's something that kind of led from me just being curious and that kid, that annoying kid in class that always raises his hand.
And throughout your podcast journey, now, what's the top five hacks that you think you've learned?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest hacks that most people should realize is that the way that I approach hack is again to try to help support the things that you're trying to do. I think that's one of the most foundational things that everybody should keep in mind is that a hack is not a easy button. It's not a zip past something button. A lot of times just going to help support the things that you're doing. So people often say the ultimate hack is that there is no hack, and I think what that means is that you have to a lot of times still do the work. You just get to have like an assistant in order to in terms of helping you to kind of support that. But if we're getting a lot more tangible into like what are the things that I personally lean on and I've heard consistently, the first thing that has come up over and over again is the morning routine. The morning routine is one of those big things, and I don't necessarily think that it needs to be one specific thing. The beauty of it is that I think it just creates some space for you to be able to tackle your day before your day tackles you at times,
Yeah.
and you can do that a lot of times in the morning. But one of the more powerful things I've heard as well too is that your morning routine actually starts the day before. So that night, what are you going to do to set the intention for that day? So that's something that's been very consistent throughout a lot of the episodes that I've done. I've had people that have talked about making super smoothies, to a person that does yoga, to praying, to reading the Bible, to working out, meditating, drinking a full glass, whatever it is. The important part is that you set your intention for your day so that you get that win before your day starts to sometimes not go towards winning as much. Um, After that, I would definitely say scheduling links has been absolutely huge. It's very small, it seems like, but it's everything with people in different countries, sometimes in different states, to be able to send a link and say, okay. let's book a time, let's speak, rather than have the back and forth, which I'm usually really, really bad at. You have that opportunity to select a time and show up at exactly the same time. So the thing about the hacks is it often isn't a big grand thing. It's sometimes the quote unquote small things that actually give you big results. One of the next things I would say is going to be my project management software. I use Basecamp, but there's things like ClickUp, Trello. We use Asana when we started. Essentially, what we do is we try to take everything that we're working on for a project or a client, and we put it all in one place. So it allows myself, but also members of the team, to have one place that they go to. So whether it's a podcast episode or it's a website that we're working on, it all goes into one place. And what it allows and makes easier is that nothing's caught in my inbox, nothing's caught in anybody else's inbox. It's all in one central place, and we can start to create processes and systems to kind of go from there. And I think those are probably some of the biggest CEO hacks, and probably if I could pick one more that I think is probably more effective and efficient than anything else, I think it's just the beauty of tools like Zoom. And how we can leverage those to connect with people instantaneously from all different parts. And I think really understanding that again, it's not in competition to the face to face. I think it's just something that can amplify those connections, those relationships. So if we're ever to use that, then it's going to just take things to another level. So those are just some of the hacks. I can go on and on and on. Obviously.
With the social links, what you were saying, I only found Calendly 5 months ago, and it is the best thing for podcasting because the amount of interviews I was either late from or I missed because I was doing back and forth emails and I just totally forgot that I'd booked in something. So this does it all for me. It gives me a reminder half an hour before. So yeah, no, that is a brilliant hack. Like not a CEO or anything, but even just in life, really. If you're scheduling regular meetings, something like that's really good to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the beautiful thing is I always say like the what I love about the podcast is I ask everybody what being a CEO means to them. And I think the beautiful thing is that the CEO to me is more of a aspirational term. It's not necessarily a title. Obviously, we have business owners, CEOs on the show, but I feel like we're all to some degree the CEO of our lives at the very least. So even though we may not have a quote unquote business, we do have things that we do on a daily basis.
No, exactly. Working in a team, how frustrating can that be, or how important is it to just have like one vision? Obviously, take everyone's ideas on board, but obviously, if you've got that one vision, but you've got people around you wanting to go off in other directions, how do you manage to rein all that in?
I think it's really, really difficult. And I think sometimes the best thing that you can do is kind of lean on other people. But I think that's ultimately what the leader has to do. The leader has to communicate and be very clear in their direction in what they're doing to everybody that's on the team. And I think that we often think that we say it once and then it's over. Like, hey, I said the mission. We wrote down the mission. It's on a wall, it's on a cup or something like that. Everybody knows the mission, but you have to continue to kind of drive that in because I think as organizations get bigger, and it's a lot of times when there's a lot of transformational things like pandemics or things like that that happen, it forces people to have to pivot and change in a different direction. So you have to continue to kind of reiterate what that vision is, reiterate what the goals are, the aspirations, the things that are the high priorities, all of those things. But I think it really starts, from the person at the top, and I think that's where so many things like the morning routine and those habits come in because the more that the more ambition that you might have in your goals, dreams, and aspirations, the more you're probably going to need clarity to simplify what that is. And that simplification doesn't just come, it actually comes because you work at it. And you work at it because you have created enough space so that you can start to solve those problems. You can start to say no to things, but you only do that because you've been able to be very clear on it. You've done that work. And I think that's what ends up happening is that you want everybody on the team to understand not only what the mission is, but also how they might support that mission. And I think that has to be said over and over again. But that's part of like what being a leader is.
And also, just then, obviously, you mentioned the pandemic, and obviously, a lot of businesses had to pivot. Do you think the world was ready to do that, or do you think people are now playing catch up still 2 to 3 years on?
Yeah, I think people are always playing catch up, it seems. You have a few of the visionaries here and there. But it's so funny. I'm in the DC area and I remember there's this place where there's a lot of traffic. They call it the mixing bowl. And it was really aspirational. They're going to build this, they're gonna, have all these lanes to take care of all this traffic. By the time they finished the mixing bowl, there was already too many people here for what was being built. So I feel like that happens a lot in business and in life where you really have to be forward thinking, and that's really difficult sometimes to do. But no, for the pandemic, no, I don't think everybody was all, definitely prepared. I think that people are starting to change more. But I think it is going to take time. It's not something that will happen instantly. But of course, you have your forward thinkers that are preparing for the next pandemic. And when I say pandemic, not an actual pandemic, that seismic shift and change that's going to happen. And of course, those are your people. Those are those people that sometimes do make that happen, and sometimes they guess right, sometimes they don't guess right, and that just kind of goes with it. But I think it just has to be in the DNA in a person to be able to say, okay, I'm gonna skate to where the puck's going to be, not to where the puck is.
And obviously, as you said about being a podcast host, but obviously you're appearing on podcasts as guests. Which one do you prefer and why? Because I've only ever been a guest on two other podcasts because I like asking the questions. I don't like answering. Which one do you, or are they both the same to you?
Yeah, Lee, I'm gonna ask you to pencil in three because I'm gonna definitely want to have you on my show as well too. So I'm gonna speak that out into fruition. Yes, absolutely. So I love being a guest on podcasts, and I really, really do, because I think that yeah, I've learned a lot, and I think it's my duty to be able to share some of the things that I've learned. Not that I'm smart, but that I'm smart enough just to ask people, and people tell me stuff, and I just basically try to, as accurately as possible, repeat what they say so that other people can kind of learn. But I would definitely say, hands down, like being a host of a podcast is my favorite. I love being able to kind of ask questions. I'm just super interested in people. And I want to know what they've done, why they've done it, what things people can learn. I want to get into the psychology of like what kind of makes them tick in terms of like going left instead of going right. Those the people that are trying to skate to where the puck's going to be. Like, why do you do that? Why did you I have all these questions. So again, I'm like that annoying kid in class that raises his hand, and I think that as much as I've kind of taught myself to also say and share the things, I prefer just to say, "Hey, I want to learn from you. Tell me what you know so I can be better by just being around you."
No, exactly. That's how I feel as well. Do you feel any pressure as a host though? Because I know we're in different niches, but I find there's a bit of pressure because someone's trusting me with their story, but we all see things differently. So when I'm editing, I'm obviously editing to the perception of how I see the episode going, and I try and keep it as raw as possible. Do you feel that pressure with you because you've had people on coming on sharing their stories and sharing their knowledge that you might miss the point while you're editing or putting the podcast out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the big challenge. So our podcast is we usually speak for about 20 to 30 minutes, but we laser focus and edit down the audio to around 16 minutes or so. And there's always um that challenge in terms of like what do you leave, what do you get rid of, and so on and so forth. So we repurpose the video part usually as is. So we kind of cheat both parts where we have a laser focus version and a full version. But I think that's always the challenge. But I always go back to kind of what I said before about like kind of like the leader is trying to create this vision in this place of like this is where we're going to go. And I don't know if you've ever heard the quote, but and I think it was Shakespeare. I can't remember who exactly said the quote, but it was like if I had more time, I would have wrote a shorter letter. And that's kind of like the spirit of the podcast is that we want to try to be like laser focused in the things that we're talking about and doing. We want to try to give people actionable things. We want to hear, of course, who the guest is, their story, their podcast, whatever it is that they're doing in their building, and we want to do that as succinctly as possible. Are we always going to hit no? Can it be nerve wracking? Sure, but I always say at the very least, like we'll repurpose the video part pretty much as is, as long as there's nothing crazy on there, it will go live. So if somebody wants to take what they want to take, then they can do that too.
And where can people listen or watch the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So the site is iamceo.co. So you can subscribe to it, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, or what I guess it's YouTube Music now that they're calling it. So all those different places, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can check it out.
And I'll put the link in the description below as well. And
Thank
also,
you.
if anyone needs your services for like building your websites and stuff, where can they find you there?
Yeah, sometimes the easiest place to go to is I have my own kind of landing page. It's called iamgresh.com. That's IAMGRESH.com. That also has links to the podcast, Blue16 Media, our digital marketing, lots of other blogs, and of course the CEO hacks as well.
Yeah, we're coming to the end of the interview. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've got like two more questions. What's the goal for 2024?
Yeah, the goal for us is really to when I started the blogs, the podcasts, and all the content, I originally just had that curiosity. And then I said, okay, if I had my digital marketing company, if I was to invest in something, what would I invest in? And I started to say, okay, I would marry these two things together. The goal for 2024 is start to have the podcast blogs start to stand on their own as their own business a little bit more. Now, we've been doing able to generate revenue in some different ways, but I think that there's still some meat on the bone, so to speak, where there's definitely some opportunity. So I'm super excited about 2024 because I think that we're going to start to take some steps there. And I think also from a Blue 16 media side, our digital marketing side, we're starting to formalize a lot of the structure, the system, the things for the team as well too. So I think that's going to allow me to I think allow not things not to be as dependent on me, and I think we're going to be able to serve clients even better.
Well, brilliant. Well, good luck with that. And the
Thank you.
last question, and this is a question I ask every guest. Your answer will not change your life journey so far, but if you had 30 seconds with your 13-year-old self, what would you say?
I would say, like in the grand scheme of things, continue to do what you're doing. You're going to hear this quote a lot later, but it's a quote that I think you should really, pay attention to more than anything else. Is don't let people tell you the sky is the limit because there's footprints on the moon. And I think that there you might have goals, dreams, aspiration, things that you want out of your life. Don't allow naysayers to say that you can't do them. You may not be able to do them, but at the very least, you try. You roll up your sleeves and you try to make it happen. And you know that it's not a straight line, but you continue to kind of work at it.
Well, Gresh, thank you so much for your time today. And please, whenever you want to, please just come back on. We'd love to have you back on and maybe get into the digital marketing side of things. But brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Lee. Looking forward to having you on as well.